Hello, welcome to another episode of the Data Science Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Cole, and today's guest is Takuya Kitagawa. He is the Chief Data Officer and Managing Executive Officer at Rakuten. Takuya, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. So, Takuya, you're based in Tokyo, Japan. So one of our three topics today is going to be talking about managing distributed teams. Another topic that we'll be talking about is something that I know almost any data science leader out there has probably faced that has customers, and that is trying to identify customers across multiple channels. In your case, Rakuten is a very large business. It has an e-commerce presence. It has a presence in mobile, has a presence in a number of different areas, and I can only imagine that sort of trying to get a single view of the customer can be very challenging. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about how data science can help us better understand human behavior. And I know that's something that you have worked on as well. So why don't we start with kind of the meaty topic, which is talking a little bit about Rakuten and the work that you and your team have done to better understand like that single view of the customer.
Sounds good. So for those of you who might not know Rakuten too well, Rakuten is a Japanese internet conglomerate. We operate about maybe 60 different services, including fintechs, Rakuten Car, Rakuten Bank, Rakuten Securities, Rakuten Insurance, and also as Dave also mentioned, e-commerce services like just typical e-commerce, travel agencies, golf booking, and others. We also own a mobile service as an MNO. We just launched a mobile service maybe a couple of years ago. We also do management of baseball team and soccer team, so that's a very unique.
Yeah.
So
FC Barcelona, right, is also your sponsor, FC Barcelona. Yes.
That's correct. That's a sponsorship.
Yep.
So because of this, presence of our services across different domains, it's very beneficial for us to have a single customer view for those services. And of course, it's extremely important to integrate those data for personalization and understanding customers. But quite often, I think many of us data scientists face this issue of, okay, how can we motivate different services to integrate with each other? And that's, I think, also the kind of problem we faced. So interestingly, which is often the case for many data issues, you have to drive this kind of integration of data, not from data motivation point of view, from personalization, but rather from more business-oriented perspective. So the way we integrated those ideas was, first of all, it had to be a top-down approach. Mm-hmm. So when we acquire customers, I think that's one of the conditions we talk with the company, that you do have to go through this integration phase. And second, to motivate this integration, we discuss how Rakuten Super Points, which is it's like a virtual currency we issue, and customers can use Rakuten Super Points to buy things and pay for services. 1 point is 1 yen. And because of this connection of Rakuten Super Points, it's easy for us to drive customer traffic from one service to the other. So, we kind of incentivize services that, look, we can send you more traffic over customers with much cheaper cost than buying from advertisement. So, using those motivations, we have integrated, those customer ID so far.
Right. So it sounds like I was going to ask you, what is the incentive for the customer? It sounds like, there's sort of a loyalty program. There's sort of a point system associated with that, and yes. You essentially get, for every point you gain through using a Rakuten service, you then can redeem it for any of the Rakuten services based on how many points you gain. So it sounds obviously that's a very there's an integrated story there. There's a marketing story there. There's a strong incentive for you to stay loyal to the Rakuten brand. Was this, so you mentioned this was a top-down initiative. So this was an initiative to roll out this royalty program. And then did you and your team have to figure out how to roll out this singular ID across? I can imagine that like after you have the ID all set up, it's probably a lot easier. But in the very beginning, you had, how many different, how many of the services had, sort of different IDs that you had to then try to collapse into a single ID.
So it was actually not my product, but we have this Rakuten ID team, which basically create a product where services have easier time to integrate the logging system to integrate. So it was just a matter of introducing those ID systems, just like a Facebook ID or Google WellBeing. And services just have to take in there. And another point is probably creating a databases that map the probably old ID to the new Rakuten ID, and those usually are done in the back. So yes, we didn't have to hustle this process. So we don't know how tough it was, but usually it was done okay. It's been done okay, and we can pick up the data from there. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the end result for the consumer, right, is this strong loyalty program that allows them to be recognized across the the various services and products that Rakuten has. But then I imagine from an analytics standpoint, right, it also makes things a lot easier. Like, is there sort of a customer data warehouse? Is there something that was sort of born from this effort that the data science team has then leveraged, and what sort of support is your team providing to the data science team?
Right. So I guess our team actually does multiple things. First of all, we play the role of data platform, of course. So we gather all those service data into one place and integrate them and make it available for product developers and data scientists. And second, we do develop marketing products. So one of the key points about this integration is, one interesting way to look at it is you can save marketing cost because you send traffic from one service to the other directly without going through other advertising channels such as Google, Twitter, or Facebook and others. Therefore, you save money in terms of CPC and customer traffic. And when you save money, what we do is we try to give back a certain percentage of those savings to customers, so that in the form of Rakuten Super Points, right? So in the form of a loyalty program. So that's how it works. So the entire business model is set up in such a way that instead of giving money to advertisement agencies, we actually give money to our customer. So that's why customers generally benefit a lot by using our IDs and services, and that's where it comes from. And because of this connection, we develop marketing products, very typical one, like lookalike functions,
right.
And then we can identify the probability of this person entering these services and products, and then target them using various channels.
Yeah.
And so we do develop internally those products. Of course, we looked into using commercially available products as well, but tight integration between our data point system and our customer touch point. We usually find it a little easier to develop them ourselves because those technologies are becoming commodities. So it wasn't that much more difficult to actually develop products. So another thing we do is develop those products so that marketers can use those products easily.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's an obvious marketing play here, but also I think from the consumer's perspective, I'm sure we've all witnessed it in working with various large companies, like large banks. Like if you're talking to the mortgage side of the home loan side of the house, and they don't know who you are, even though you've been, say, you've had a checking and a savings account with the bank for 20 years, that can be incredibly frustrating, right? So, being able to have that single view of the customer, being able to know, sort of their background as you're talking to them, to me, just tightens the relationship and strengthens the loyalty between the consumer and the brand. So it's good to see that like there's you're looking at it from the marketing perspective, and you're also looking from the consumer's perspective. It makes perfect sense for me. I'd like to change gears a little bit, Takuya, and talk next about managing distributed teams. So can you talk a little bit about like how is your data science team distributed globally today?
Yes. Yeah, let me describe my team first. So we have about close to 1,000 people in my team under the management chief data officer, and the biggest region is still Japan because that's the biggest market we operate in. I would say maybe 300, 400 people in Japan, and second biggest one is probably US, 200 to 300 people. Within US, there are a few regions we operate in, San Mateo, Boston, Seattle. Third biggest region is India. We have maybe 200 people, mainly in Bangalore, and a few small teams in Singapore and Paris, France. And we also have a kind of operating center in China as well. So those are the kind of distributed team we have.
Wow. So, I mean, it's one thing just to manage a team of 1,000, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that and the challenges of managing such a large team. But let's first talk about just the fact that they're sort of geographically distributed. I mean, you have 60 different services. Are they they aligned by the various verticals, or are they aligned by the regions in which you do business? Like talk to me about a little bit of like why are they in these various locales, and then we'll sort of peel back the onion to understand more about how you actually manage these teams.
Yeah, there are majorly two drivers for why this distributed team were created. One is market. We are trying to expand our presence in businesses to outside of Japan, US, Europe, and other regions. So that's the first drive. Together with some of the acquisitions companies, we decided to have teams in those regions first. And second driver is of course talent, right? For example, India, we don't have operating business there, but we work with a team as a talent pool, and as it turns out, Indian talent are fantastic, and also culturally, actually, India and Japan go really, really well. I guess India culture has been excellent in U.S. culture as well. So it maybe just India culture is very adaptable. But we also found Japanese culture goes really well with India. So that's a natural expansion of India team.
So let me add, you talked about culture. I'm curious. You went to school in the States at Harvard. But obviously, you working in Tokyo and Japan. Like, what are some of the differences that you've seen? I mean, you said culturally between, and maybe we can focus just a bit on how data science is done. I mean, do you see there to be is it very similar, or are there sort of cultural differences in how the work gets done?
That's a really interesting question. Fundamentally, I see more commonality than differences among different regions data scientists because of the common language we speak, right? We speak computer science language, we speak mathematics. So it's just so comforting that we can communicate with each other with respect, no matter what the culture is. So that's a very, very nice aspect of doing data science in a global sense. But at the same time, yes, I do see strengths in different regions. So, for example, Japanese people, and I guess not many people have worked with Japanese engineers or data scientists before. Japanese data engineers are, for example, extremely meticulous. Maybe you can pick up from how we make cars in Toyota and other places. And they're extremely, patient. So, it's quite often said that, one of the strengths of Japan as a manufacturing country is the interface between different processes. So, this Kaizen process is originally created as a way to solve friction between like first process and second process. And in between the different processes, there's usually an interface between people and people. And there you have to do kind of alignment of the processes. And quite often, of course, as engineers, you try to automate that, interface through API. And when you can do that, you can kind of scale up the process much faster. But there are some processes that it's extremely difficult to, automate, such as, chemical processes or, some project management or product management processes.
Right.
And there, and especially, data engineering work, it tends to involve those kind of, human in the loop kind of process, right? Because you have to understand metadata, you have to actually, drag along, the historical legacy systems.
Right.
So that's where, for example, Japanese engineers excel. Another example is maybe India. India is a huge country, and there are so many people in there. So I'm pretty sure this is maybe a little bit of biased, perspective because I worked with those kind of people. But for example, people in India in my team are extremely good at data analytics. So they're very good at understanding customers' needs for what they want to understand, what they want to analyze, and patiently create dashboards to try to extract the insights. And I found some talents in India to be excellent. I usually struggle to convey these kind of messages to some other data scientists, but people in India tend to do this really well. Whether this is a particular leader or just a culture,
Right.
I don't know actually for sure, but
Yeah.
I tend to find this is true. Yeah.
That's awesome. So along those lines, like, so it sounds to me like you're looking at various talent pools around the world. Being a global company like Rakuten, you're able to tap into these global pools, but also you're trying to expand into these regions as well. So are they in these various regions? In the U.S., India, Singapore, Paris, China, and Japan. Are there particular areas of focus? Like, do you have the folks in India, building out dashboards, and in Japan, owning the data engineering, or are they focused on sort of the data that sort of resides in that region, or is it a mix?
So generally, I'm focusing on India for now, due to the I think people are becoming more aware the salary difference between different regions, and some of them are closing down if those people speak English, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
there's no reason why you cannot work for U.S. companies if you speak English. But still, there are some salary gap remains, and it's quickly changing. So it doesn't stay more than like a couple of years. But yes, from that perspective, India talent for us is excellent. U.S. talent are generally the most advanced people in terms of technology usage, and just amount of information you gain being in U.S. environment or tech environment is huge, right? So that's also where we also focus on. We try to make sure that we have sizable talent from US, so that we can be on top of all the technology advancement, especially data technology and machine learning technology and deep learning technology have been advancing so fast these 5 years. So I think this is a must.
So out of your entire team, right, your 1,000 folks, like, how are you striking the balance between doing sort of research projects, right? I mean, just reading through your LinkedIn, you're even mentioning some moonshot projects, right? So how do you strike the balance between doing some of these moonshot projects and then doing the projects that the business is clamoring for and really wanting you to do?
Sounds good. So we have research institute called Rakuten Institute of Technology, and there are more than 100 people, PhDs in that group. Those people used to be before I took over the organization, focus on more research, topics as you mentioned.
Right.
But as I see the trend in the last 5 years, where deep learning is now advanced, models like GPT-3 or BERT being created, I just see such a small difference between R&D work and product development and applications these days. So I actually shifted maybe 2 or 3 years ago to say that I actually believe most of the research work can be connected with applications in the next 2 to 3 years. Time horizon maybe in the past has been maybe you should think about 10 years time frame, but now I feel like a great research can be done by thinking about 3 years ahead rather than 10 years.
Why do you think that is?
It's just a number of people who's working on the field is so large. And I think we made a breakthrough in deep learning in a way that makes the far future much come closer.
Right.
And you say demand is the mother of invention, right? So depending on the field, this time scale is different. For example, I used to be a theoretical physicist and working on a quantum computer and quantum technology. In this field, still, I would say maybe 20, 30 years is at the right time scale. So there, I wouldn't actually demand, the application to be there in 3 years, but more like, it should be in 10 years. But looking at, AI field and data science, I think right time horizon is 3 years, and 3 years is a short enough time frame to call it more like a product development than research. So I'm directing many of my researchers to that direction. Having said that, I still think maybe 5 to 10% of our efforts should be focused on far future visions. Maybe one way to put it is, let's say it's easy to imagine what Rakuten as a group is making money out of in the next 3 to 5 years time frame, but it's hard to imagine what we will be doing in 10 years.
Right.
And it's our job to propose. Look, Miki is the CEO of Rakuten Group. You really should pay attention to this new technology because it's coming up, and it's our job to propose and point to the right direction for the entire Rakuten Group to go. And that's what we call moonshot technology. And we work on quantum technologies because also because of the connection with my background, and second medical research that Miki has been investing in the last 3 years.
Wow. So yeah, I think a lot of data science leaders probably want to have some mix, right, of what you're calling moonshot projects, like but it sounds like your projects are not just hey, we want a better targeting algorithm for our marketing team using a different algorithm that might be considered cutting edge. It sounds like your moonshot projects are actually potential new services that Rakuten can offer, potentially even driving new product and innovation. I think that's that's a different sort of category altogether, but it is also something that I think data science leaders need to be thinking about. I think there's we talk a lot about on the DSL podcast about how data science teams have sort of started to support the various businesses, right, to help them better understand their customer, or better understand where there might be product feature gaps, or whatever the use case may be. But now there's a shift, right, that seems to be happening where the chief data officer and the chief data scientist are being looked to actually create products that or services that can directly touch the consumer and enhance their experience, or even drive be a revenue generator. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're leaning towards when you're talking about a moonshot project.
That's totally right. So Dave, one thing what I'm excited about is exactly to your point, how to connect research with product more closely together. I think the trend is coming up as to integrate AI technologies and services very close with each other, and AI and machine learning shouldn't be a second thoughts, right? On the services. And traditionally, when we build out our machine learning algorithms, it's always on top of services that exist, right? Recommendation engine, we add it as a component. A/B testing functions that you put on top of web design. But those are the all times, right? Now we really should think about feedback loops between customer behavior and products, and to create a great feedback loops, you really have to design the entire service based on AI and machine learning in place.
Right.
So, maybe TikTok is a famous example that's designed that way. The entire display of the movies, short movies, are done by AI and machine learning, and it was clear how to collect the customer behavior data to feedback to personalization recommendation of the short movies. So my bet is in the next 10 years. Many of the services we see today will be completely transformed and disrupted in this way.
Yeah,
right.
I think I'm just hearing you talk. Like one idea that's percolating in my head is just like anytime a decision is being made, right? Anytime that a recommendation of the next video that you should watch, or a next product maybe that you should look at, or whether or not to approve a loan, all these sorts of things. Anytime a decision is made, I think there's an opportunity for machine learning AI to potentially play a role. To what extent, I think, it depends on how on its accuracy and how good it ends up sort of being, which takes humans to get to where we are today, to hopefully a future where it's much better, right, than what is going on today. So speaking of which, I wanted to dive into the last topic, which is talking about understanding human behavior. And I know you've written a little bit about that. I want to understand a little bit, like this, explain to us, like explain to me how data science, like how you are using data science to better understand human behavior. Maybe even talk about your additional projects on the WellBeing for Planet Earth Foundation too. I don't know if there's a relation there, but yeah.
Certainly there is. So when it comes to understanding, human behavior and human being, I want to actually revisit the definition of understanding, right? What does it mean to understand human? So, having this background of theoretical physics, traditionally, science had three different definitions of understanding. So, if you're a mathematician, you define understanding to be classifying. Okay, so. For those of us who have studied mathematics in a quite deep way in universities, we actually know fields like topology is about classifying shape, and as it turns out, many of other mathematics fields can be considered as a classification. Even algebra is a classification of different manipulation of numbers. So. But this is, very natural, right? Marketers feel like they understand human when they classify or segment customers into different segments, right?
Right.
So that's one understanding, one way to describe understanding. Second way to describe understanding is physics way of understanding, which is usually about prediction. Okay, so you have a theory, you have a principle, and if you can predict what happens next, then physicists feel like they understood the underlying mechanism. So so if you can predict customer behavior, maybe you can say you can understood customers. But the current computer science community don't satisfy themselves by just predicting. They actually want to realize what the customer wants to get. So that's the engineering way of defining understanding. So engineers usually say they understood something when they can make something happen. Okay. And in this case, we want to understand customers' demand, and if we can support through our services or products what they want to achieve, and then help them achieve the goal, then we feel like we understood the customer. Right. So I think in any of those three areas, I think if you're a data scientist, it's easy to pinpoint a particular technology that allow us to do this. So that's how I'm kind of paraphrasing my way of understanding human behavior.
So yeah, let me try to understand it myself and make sure I'm hearing you right. But it sounds like it's not good enough just to be able to predict what the user is doing next or the customer is doing next. To really truly understand your customer, you have to understand what their true needs are. I mean, just because they might click on the button on the left, it might have been because it's big and it's red, or whatever, it's blinking, but that might not have been what they're actually trying to do. That might not have been what their end goal is, and that's what true understanding of sort of humans entails. It's like, what are you really getting at? What's the question behind the question, or what is your intent, right? Not what you actually sort of did, potentially by mistake. Is that right?
That's correct. So, one project I'm really excited about that I'm doing in my company right now is demand understanding of customers based on search words. Mm-hmm. It's such an obvious thing to do, right? As an e-commerce company, you have all the inquiries and words coming in from customers, and if you find demand of customers that are not met by our supply of products, then that's an opportunity. That's a very plain opportunity that you can capture and you can monetize. Mm-hmm. So all the makers and brands get really excited to find, okay, what are the keywords that are not captured by our current product portfolio, right? But interesting thing is, as much as many e-commerce companies have worked on this before, due to the difficulty in natural language processing, I bet many of you haven't seen too much of those quantifying the demand of customers in e-commerce. So, a good example is if the brand wants to create a new product in, let's say, cosmetics, mm-hmm. they should know end to end what are the current demand of the customers, what are pains of the customers, and what they should do. But you haven't seen before, what are actually the pain points that are not solved. So, for example, there's a shoe category called pumps. Mostly for female, mm-hmm. and if you look at analysis of our natural language processing in our e-commerce site, you find many people searching for pumps less painful, and apparently pumps, when they are not, when the shape of the pumps is not fit with the legs, foot, right. It's extremely painful, and apparently not many brands have solved this issue. And when brands can solve these kind of issues, people tend to search directly the brand name. Okay.
Right.
And the fact that there are so many searches with this pain statement rather than brand directly indicates there aren't many known brands that capture this demand.
Right.
So if you can quantify this and show it to brands, that's like a gold sitting there. Opportunity for business. So, that's one thing we are doing, and it's even surprising that up to this point, not many companies have come up with the solution to this problem. And I think it is a fantastic, problem to solve using AI and data science.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I mean, being able to uncover, sort of gaps in products by looking at search terms, and then actually, you turning around to the suppliers who are creating these various pumps, mm-hmm. And saying like, hey, there's a big problem and I don't think you're solving it. Now one of the challenges is you then have is when that first shoe company solves that problem, then people might not search on that as much anymore. They might go directly to that product, right? Correct. So then you have to understand, well, why are they going to that product? It's because it's less painful and it's a more comfortable shoe to more comfortable pump to wear. So that's then uncovering the why behind why customers are buying a particular product, which mm-hmm. can also be interesting too, right? So well, this is this has been truly fascinating. I did want to call out just WellBeing for Planet Earth Foundation. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I'm just very curious about that.
Yes. And I also want to actually connect this story with a previous, story I told you. So the reason we started, this WellBeing, foundation, mm-hmm. is this entire world is now making progress in terms of making money, right? So, as a capitalistic world, we are making such a great progress in increasing GDP per capita in the world. And in the last 20, 30 years, the efficiency is off the charts. Yeah, exactly. It's extremely doing well. Mm-hmm. Now, if you measure of course, there's a debate on how to measure it. But if you measure the well-being of people, it stays almost flat in some measurement in the last 20 years. And I think people feel it. People feel like we are so much richer than 20 years ago and 30 years ago, but it doesn't feel like we are getting any better experiences in life. We are actually maybe even more depressed due to hardworking, COVID-19 and other things.
Right.
And where is enriching experiences we are supposed to have? What is the experience we are missing? And the proposal from WellBeing Foundation is the reason this hasn't been improved, well-being of a human society hasn't been improved, is precisely because we have not measured it, right, in a way that we can improve. So, and our fundamental belief is, human beings are very hardworking in general. So as long as you can measure it and people trust that number, the human society is going to drive the entire innovation toward improving that number. Okay,
right.
So maybe fundamental issue is we haven't measured the well-being. Now, once we decided that that's the issue, the question comes to, okay, how do we, measure the well-being, and how do we actually scientifically validate that, measurement of well-being is actually a good one that we can follow. And, there are many efforts that's going on. The most famous one is a report coming from, World Happiness Report. And this, report is based on a survey conducted by Gallup company. And many economists actually analyze that data and report. And we actually, as a WellBeing Foundation, we are working with Gallup to add new perspective to the definition of well-being. The previous definition of well-being has been very much, focused on Western cultures. And unfortunately, many of the Eastern, cultures, including Japan, has been, included. For example, the well-being questionnaire usually asks, are you happy? Are you well-being? And many kind of Japanese people usually gets puzzled by the question and look around and say, am I happy? Because whether you're happy or not hugely depends on your community happiness. Unless your friends are happy, you cannot say you as an individual is not really happy, because this community concept is much stronger than individual concept, right? So those kind of nuances are not being captured in the current survey. So we are proposing, okay, look, to make it more inclusive definition of well-being, we should change it in this way and that way. Now, I want to connect this with my work in the data science. Mm-hmm. Previously, when I talk about this demand understanding, this is in a trend of more like customer-centric culture. If you design your product in a customer-centric way, customers will want your services more, and therefore you're going to be more successful in business. But I feel like the world is gonna next 10 years is gonna change to shift from customer-centric to well-being, meaning that yes, listening to customer is absolutely important. Of course that's a starting point, right. But maybe people are asking for a little bit more. Maybe people are asking, okay, how can I be, stay well-being beyond just, achieving my own want, right? Because sometimes I don't know, maybe due to lack of, education, due to lack of experiences, how can I get to the point of well-being? Especially when your mental state is not very good, right? When you're depressed, you're, kind of trapped, right? You cannot imagine how I can be, go back to, happy self. And sometimes, you need a little bit of hands from other people to guide you to get to the better place. And the same thing can be said about financial well-being, right? Yes, if the people have enough knowledge about, how to do the investment, that's good, but most people don't. And most people, ask for advice. Okay, what's the right, approach to, asset management, right? So, that's where, education happens. That's where you need to ask a question of, what does it mean to be, financial well-being with the risk, propensity that you have. So, I feel like, the society has to go from customer-centric to well-being going forward. And, to know what's really well-being, you have to measure it. So, all those things are being connected. So, that's how I'm thinking about, the connection.
That is fascinating. I mean, I think, most companies would say, to your point today, that like, oh yeah, we want to really understand our customer, we want to understand their needs. And we want to make sure that we give them a personalized experience, or or what have you. But I don't think many companies are out there outside of yourself, Takuya, who are thinking about the well-being of their customers and not thinking about like how do I maximize profit from a particular customer, but instead saying, you know what, for us to have a great brand, right, to have a great relationship with our customers, we have to understand what makes them happy, and we have to understand like is our experience with them, is it our interaction helping them, right? And you also mentioned it could be education, it could be we could put financial instruments in front of them till they're blue in the face, but like maybe they don't understand the right investments to make and how they and maybe there's something there that we should do that will actually make them happy before we present them with a particular product.
That's
so.
correct.
I like that. I like that future. That gives me hope. That gives me optimism, and I think that's a great place to end here in this world of COVID and everything else going on. I think to have people like yourself out there focused on not on my well-being, hopefully one day improving and being able to measure that for good makes me very happy.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed this, Takuya. If people want to reach out to you, can they hit you up on LinkedIn to answer any questions that you may have or they may have?
Yes, please.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I will be following your quest on improving the well-being of planet Earth very closely.
Thank you. I'd love to make progress together with the rest of the data scientists.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Takuya.